South Africa is now ranked 72nd out of 180 countries for perceived levels of public sector corruption. That's according to the Transparency International's 2022 Corruption Perception Index. President Cyril Ramaphosa has on numerous occasions vowed to crack down on graft in this country, while some high-profile cases are already before the courts. Let's make sense of this for you now. Bring in OUTA CEO Duvenage, who joins us via our video link this morning. Great to see you as always, Wayne. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. Shall we perhaps begin by just unpacking how this CPI is measured, this Corruption Perception Index, because perception, as it were, can be a very elusive concept.
Yes, it is, and it's a very difficult one to measure other than to gauge perceptions of civil society, businesses, and other sectors of society in the country. And perception, as they say, is the reality, and this is how they go about, I think, getting their information. It is an international body, and I think if one looks at the trends and the various reports over time, it tends to be an accurate measure of the levels of perception or the levels of corruption in a country. So we see it as a pretty accurate assessment of the situation of corruption in the world.
Yeah. In the world. And despite the fact that there is some kind of feeling, at least in some quarters of society, that work is being done to crack down on corruption through the State Capital Commission of Inquiry, some of the cases before the courts, we have slipped in this ranking at 70 in 2021, and now we've slipped to 72 out of these 180 countries.
Yes, and that's not a good thing. And one would imagine, after the state capture years when Jacob Zuma was in control of the country or in power, and the talk of introducing anti-corruption measures as Cyril Ramaphosa came in, and there were some good things that were being done, specifically around the NPA leadership, the SIU, and the Hawks and others, that we would be moving in the right direction. And it seems that that's not the case, and it's understandable because what has happened is that the body and the institution, the National Anti-Corruption Council, that took a long time to be set up, first of all. And secondly, corruption hasn't stopped. It continues unabated, maybe less so at the national level in the state-owned entities who've attracted the highlights and the spotlight on them for many years now. But it is rampant in provincial and local government levels, and we see the failure of local government, the demise, the Auditor General's reports, and all of this brings to mind a country that is not getting to grips with corruption. Yeah.
What has also been interesting is that it seems the criticism here is not really against our anti-corruption laws. It's more on how those laws essentially find meaning, how they manifest in reality.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So if we're not going to demonstrate, and still too many people are walking the streets that are implicated and seriously implicated in corruption, if there's still a lack of accountability that is being meted out, then the public are going to have this view and this perception that corruption isn't being dealt with effectively. And every day they read, and we read in the various medias and articles that so much corruption is taking place. So until we get on top of it, until we start seeing accountability, arrests, people being put in jail for their role and participation in big corruption, we're just not going to change this perception. And I believe there's still a lot more work to do. There has been a good amount of work that's been done, but it's not enough and not quick enough to change this perception that there is the corruption is not being controlled in South Africa.
Yeah, and of course, as we try to find the solutions, there are going to be people who are desperate to get us to what they think is the root of the problem. And that's when this idea of the legacies of geographical morality come in, right? Colonialism, apartheid, etc., which apparently are keeping us in this corruption dam. Do those people pointing to that still do you reckon, have a point?
Yes, I guess there are a number of factors that live with us. There's a legacy of corrupt mindsets from a national leadership position, and unless we shake that off, and unless we really turn this country around into a citizen-centric leadership, and it starts at the top, but citizen leadership entities within government that can demonstrate that it does put its citizens first, that we are not going to be paying more for all the infrastructure that we have, that we don't have systemic corruption and facilitation fees and costs associated with corruption permeating society as it has done for decades now. And we go back to the apartheid years when we talk about that, then it frustrates society, and the perception is that we are battling to take the shackles of corruption that hold us back as a nation. We can be doing so much now, 3 years into democracy, last 3 decades, into democracy. We should have done so much to break this down and deal with it, and yet here we are. Still struggling and still have this frustration and this massive cost and burden that could be spent wisely in this country just being lost to enriching few people.
Right. You'll be hard-pressed to find any country without corruption. In fact, there are people who believe such countries don't exist. However, there are countries that do better than others. According to this ranking, it's New Zealand and the likes of Denmark. I wonder, from your standpoint, given what we know about how they operate, if there's anything that stands out about what these countries do right.
I think what you would find in those countries is that money is well spent. It's spent on its citizens. So if you are paying taxes in a country, and everyone's a taxpayer, right down to the goods you buy with your grants from government, you're paying taxes and VAT in the form of VAT. And one just wants to see that return on the taxes that are collected go back to the people. So in those countries, you can go to government hospitals and get the best treatments. You can go to government schools and get state schools and get the best education, and universities. You can call the police and they will react very quickly if you are in need of security. That's not the case here. And you've got to ask yourself why, and you've got to wonder why that is. And it's not because we don't have the money. If you look at the revenues that are collected at national and local government, they have exceeded CPI. And if you just go back 20 years, back to Madiba's time and where we were under Mbeki, how much we were getting in return for our taxes as a nation, as citizens at both local and government level, that is now dissipated. Water is becoming a problem. Electricity, I don't have to tell you about that, but we've misspent our money. And that's what the corruption index is showing us. So those countries have a higher return on their taxes that are collected. Their citizens feel safe. Their citizens feel well looked after. That's not the case in South Africa.
Yeah, it goes without saying, a sentiment that I think many would echo in this country. Wayne Duvenage, thanks for speaking to us. Really appreciate your time. Wayne is the CEO of the organization and doing tax abuse. Once again, thanks very much indeed.